Welcome to Unlock the Code, the ultimate autism podcast. We help you unlock the mysteries of autism so your child can be successful in all areas of his life. With your host, the internationally acclaimed author, speaker, and autism and behavior expert, the CEO of Hope Education Services, Jessica Leichtweisz.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this special episode of Unlock the Code, the ultimate autism podcast, where we bring you all aspects of how to help your families affected by autism. If you don't know me, my name is Jessica Leichtweisz. I'm the CEO of Hope Education Services, and I'm the host of this podcast. I've been working with families affected by autism for more than 10 years. It's interesting that this topic is what we're talking about tonight because just 48 hours ago, I made a decision in my branding for my business and my company, Hope Education Services, to switch from using the word parent to using the word mother. Because what I found in my 10 years of experience and looking at the analytics of the people on my YouTube list and the people on my email database and on my Facebook page is that overwhelmingly they were all women. They were all mothers. And having worked with children for more than 10 years, now I've met some exceptional fathers who were really just involved in their child's life. But sadly, I have found that over 70% of the time, I can consult with a family for 1 year, even longer, and never meet the father. And it always bothered me why fathers aren't more involved. But I felt that as a professional and not being a father, not being a male, I really didn't have much to say about it. And it was the very, very day, not an hour after I made the decision to switch my branding, that this amazing person reached out to me, and he offered to share a book he wrote called Totally Lost, a brutally honest assessment of raising a child on the autism spectrum. And I asked him, well, tell me a little bit about your book. And he talked about the fact that as a father, he wanted to reach other fathers to be the best autism parent they can possibly be. And that's literally all I knew about him. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is a total God moment. You have to come on my show. And I said, okay, we're going to book a podcast. And typically I have calls scheduled all the way for a month out. All the episodes for the next couple months are already scheduled. I have my guests lined up, and there's a waiting list and application to get on this podcast. But I'm like, no, we're going to make this video today or tomorrow. So I met him just yesterday, and today we have the show. So I'm excited to introduce John D. Richmond on the show. He's a proud husband and father of 2 kids. He has a 2-year-old little girl and a 6-year-old son who was diagnosed in the autism spectrum right after his 5th birthday. So the diagnosis and the search for what autism is, how it affected his son, it took a toll on him and his family. And he realized that if his son, if he didn't change what he was doing to find out what resources were available to help his son, that his son was never going to live into the person that he deserves to be and that he can be. So he decided to write this book to share and to just memorialize the experiences that he had with his son and helping his son, and really what it means to him to be an amazing autism father. He has a master's degree in business administration. He's currently pursuing a PhD in applied technology, and he's a published author. He's a published researcher. He's passionate about higher education. He's passionate about his career. He's passionate about helping other families affected by autism, and most importantly, he's passionate about being an amazing father to his children. So, John, welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate you having me on.
No, absolutely, and I'm so grateful. I can't even tell you how grateful I am that you were to come on, especially just knowing that it all happened seemingly at the right time. Now, we were chatting for just a few moments before I got on this call, and I had told you that the truth, right, that most often I never meet the fathers of the children I consult with. And currently I have probably right now about 20 clients that I work with actively, and there's only 3 that the fathers that I know, and I visit these clients on a weekly basis. And, you know, how does that make you feel as a father?
I got to tell, there's part of me that is proud to be in, proud to fill that gap, and then the rest of me is very, very saddened by that. I mean, that's not a good ratio for men in general. We've got to take more role in our kids' lives, and I think that's, even beyond the autism, beyond the children with special needs, dads just have to get more involved. I think it's one thing that's missing from our society is that, when you have both parents, it just makes it, there's things that both parents can bring to the table. When you don't have some of that, there's really something missing from kids' lives. There's just no, the research, the statistics is all there to support that. When you have a two-parent household, that generally the kids do better in life, and that, like I said, part of me is proud of myself, proud of the people around me that I see that they're doing right by their kids, and then the other part of me is very, very saddened by that, because it's not a good ratio.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And I just want to say this: we have a lot of single parents on our show, and when we say that, right, children do better when both parents are involved, we don't want to undermine, right, what a single mother or even single father. I have worked with single fathers who are making sacrifices every day to raise their child and do the best that they can. We don't want to undermine that. But what I've also found is that oftentimes a household functions like a single-parent household, even when parents are living together. And, John, you're right. Like, it's not just an issue of autism. It's a societal issue that we have to talk about, of both parents being more involved in their child's life. If you go onto my YouTube channel, it's parenttrainingvideos.com, this will be on there. I talk often about parents needing to be in a bigger role in advocating for their child and being the most important person in their child's life. It's just something that we need all parents to do. But I also want to say that someone always has to go first. And as far as I've known, and I've been doing this for more than 10 years, John, I've never seen a father come out and say, okay, you know what, I want to reach other fathers. I want to inspire people to be the best parent they can. So thank you for being that person who goes first.
Thank you. I got to tell you, so when I started writing my book, it was purely a coping mechanism for me. And one of the things the reason I started writing it and the reason I decided to publish it were very different. I started writing it basically as my own coping mechanism. I decided to publish it because I realized that there were other people out there like me, that I wasn't the only one going through this. And so we started looking around, some literature out there, and most of what I found were, PhDs writing from a very scientific perspective, and that's all very useful information, but I didn't come across a whole lot where it was somebody that had been through this and come out on the other side better than they went in, and had been through the same things that we were feeling, and that's the reason I decided to publish it. So, like I said, I went into it. The writing is purely a coping mechanism for me. I found writing to be very cathartic. I've always been a very talented writer, so I just sat down and started kind of memorializing what we had been through. I let my mom and my wife both read it, and they both said the same thing. They both said this is very good, and this is also very helpful, because, of course, they were going through the same thing. One thing I always tell people is one person gets diagnosed with autism, but the entire family lives it. So we were all grieving and going through this process of trying to understand what had just been the hand we had just been dealt. And, so they were both, hey, this helps me. Can you imagine a perfect stranger reading this, knowing that somebody else has gone into this and come out better off on the other side? Was really the reason I started writing. It was really the reason I published it. And it just made for a great coping mechanism for me to be able to sit down and write it, and then also to be able to help people on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I having gone through some times in my own life where I've gone through trials in my own life, knowing that when you take something that some people might look at and they might see as a negative experience or something, even as a trial, and you use it as a positive experience, not only to make your life better, but to make everyone else's life better, it's certainly commendable. Now, a lot of people who listen to my podcast, they're just kind of experiencing for the first time this diagnosis. They're just getting a diagnosis. Maybe even they're waiting to see a developmental pediatrician. They're waiting to find out if their child does have autism. So I wanted you to share a little bit about, what your journey was like in your family and how it affected your family, and especially as a father, how it affected you to hear your child has autism. Now, I don't know if there's research done on this, but from my experience, that fathers often have a harder time hearing my child has autism. They tend to blame it on themselves more than women do. And certainly every parent I've ever worked with, whether it was a mother or a father, at some point they ask me, was this my fault? Did I do something wrong? Did I pass this on to my child? But, what was it like for you and your family, when your child was diagnosed, and how did you deal with the emotions around it?
Well, so when we first started, so my wife and I are both intelligent people. We knew, there was things, as my wife liked to say, my son, we'll call him Rudy. I use the name Rudy for him in the book. Rudy had quirks from a very young age. His speech was delayed. So we knew something was going on. We didn't really know what autism was, but we knew something was going on. So we start down the path, start with his pediatrician. His pediatrician agrees, yeah, there's some things going on here we need to look at. And I will tell you the hardest part about, and I talk about this in my book, the hardest part about finding out my son was autistic was the process of finding out that he was autistic. It took years for us to go through the process for somebody to finally step out and say, yes, he is autistic, do the proper paperwork. I will tell you, I talk about some caregivers in my book in not a real favorable light. And I have heard a lot of other people going through this too, that they just can't get anybody to diagnose, that getting to diagnosis is the most difficult part. So, yeah, we went about 2 years of bouncing around from speech therapists to developmental pediatricians to other caregivers, and we just kept getting told no, no, and no again. And finally, we were just about getting ready to enroll him in kindergarten, and we went out there, we went out to his school district, and they didn't shy away from the elephant in the room. They all said, there's some things we're noticing here. Would you mind if we did autism assessment? And we said, no, of course not. And when I say the previous caregivers spent, 20 minutes maybe with us. These people spent hours and burned through reams of paper, all these well-documented research. I mean, they really did an evaluation with a capital E. And by the end of it, I'll never forget the young lady that we were talking with. She had called us in. She said, I'd like for you to come in, because we were doing I'm not sure if this is what they refer to it as nationwide, but they're ARD meetings. Here's what we call them where I live. And you can gather around a table with all the different people in the school district that are going to be providing special education services to your child, and they tell you what they're going to do. So they said to make that meeting go easier, I would like for you to come in and just speak with me ahead of time, and I'll kind of walk you through the results of everything. So she comes in, so we come in the day before, and we spent 3 hours with this lady, and she was, from the very beginning, she was talking about the assessments, and I don't begin to understand a lot of what the assessments were. The only thing I know when she first started is I'm hearing a lot of, so she's ranking him basically from 0, meaning no, it's not common in autistic children, to 4, very common in autistic children. And at first we're hearing a lot of 0s, and then as it progresses, we're hearing a lot of 3s and 4s, and I'm getting terrified. I mean, I'm really, really starting to, I'm picked up on her trail, and I know where she's headed with this. And then she looks at me and she says, the scale tops out at 10 being the highest number, and Rudy scored a 13. And that's kind of when the ton of bricks hit me. It was not a fun place to be. My first reaction was anger. I was very angry at the people that we had been dealing with and paid God knows how much money over the last couple of years to get to this point where the public school system is the one that finally identified it and finally stepped out on a limb and told us and didn't shy away from the truth. After that, the best advice I can give people for that night, you are not going to accomplish anything that night. The best thing you can do that night is to just get in bed. Get in bed. Tomorrow's a new day. When you wake up the next morning, you're going to feel very different than you did the day before. You're going to look around you. The sun will still rise in the east. Rudy was still the same. He didn't know any different. Your kids aren't going to change. Your job, everything's still going to feel exactly the same. But I felt very different. It was a very strange feeling. It was like everything I looked at, everything I had known, everything I had built around me, my house, my job, my career, my family, just all looked very different to me for a little while. It was a very strange feeling, very uneasy feeling. It waned over the next few days, but it was just this grieving period that I was having of going, it's because one minute you're a parent, and the next minute you're the parent of a special needs child, and that's not an easy thing to hear, especially for somebody like me. My wife and I both, life has come pretty easy to both of us. We both were very good in school. I was one of the more popular kids. I was always good in athletics. Socially, I mean, as you can tell right now, talking is not a big issue for me. I can talk all day long. Writing was never a problem, and these are all things my son is going to struggle with throughout his entire life. And that fact alone kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, where it was like, I can't relate to him on a lot of what he's struggling with, and that really hurts. As a dad, as somebody that school came very easy to, like you said, I've got a master's degree. I'm on my way to a PhD. School was always very easy. It was always very popular. I was, socially is not a problem, and these are all things my son is going to struggle with his entire life, and that was not a fun place to be for a little while. We had to, there was a grieving process. I don't know how else to describe it, but a grieving process you have to go through to get to where you can accept your new reality, even though nothing technically changed from yesterday to today, but you're now living in a new world, living in a new reality, that you have a special needs child. For dads, I don't know if it was necessarily harder on me than my wife in actuality, but I definitely took it harder. My wife, being the nurturing one that she is, she was, her first thing was, okay, we need to get him help. And what can we do to help him? My first thought was, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? What did I do wrong? Who failed me? And then it turned to, after a day or two, what did I do wrong? And that's kind of where I was for a couple of weeks, really. And then finally I talked with my mom, and she said, John, listen, you've been given this for a reason that you may never know, and it doesn't matter why you've been given this charge. Because I got to tell you, I was very, and I struggle with this a little bit to this day. I talk about it multiple times in my book. Why did God choose me for this? Why, I feel ill-equipped for this. And there are just days that go by that I'm like, why did he choose? There's so many other people out there better for this than me. And it's just a grieving process you have to go through. And then after you get done with that grieving process, from then on, it's like every now and then he does something that is different from his typically developing peers. And it kind of takes you back to that same place of, why me? Well, I'm ill-equipped for this, and you have to fight through those times as a husband and father. I talk about it in my book that I call what I call paternal jurisdiction, meaning I've got to keep the roof over the head. Well, whether my wife works or not, it's up to me to keep the roof over my head and my family fed. That's on me if it fails. And this is just one other thing to add to that, which is already a very stressful place for men to be. I remember my dad growing up. He didn't like the term breadwinner, sole breadwinner. He never really liked that. I don't particularly like that. I think that my wife and I are a team. But the fact of the matter is, if my wife comes up tomorrow and decides no, she's going to stay home with the kids and she's not going to work anymore, it falls on my head to keep bringing home the bacon and keep my family fed and keep our dwelling up to the standards that we've set. So it's a different mindset for men than it is for women. My wife's first thoughts were, I need to take care of my son. My first thought was, what did I fail at? Right or wrong, I don't know, but it was just kind of the way it worked out.
Yeah, John, it's time and time again I hear this reaction, and I'm going to be honest, this is the first time I've ever experienced a man coming out and saying it. So your authenticity, your honesty, your heart is just shining through, and I'm like, literally, I'm trying to maintain composure, and I'm also fighting back tears, because this is exactly what you said is what every mother has told me, every wife has told me about their husband, and I've never had a man come out and just say, I took it really hard. I took it on myself. And, it's often said that an autism parent, they don't volunteer, they don't sign up for it, they're drafted into this. And you talked about, like, well, why is God doing this? Why is God trusting me, right? It brings me to that Mother Teresa quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but, I know God would never give me more than I can handle, but I wish he didn't trust me so much, right? And I want to just bring up a few things that you talked about, and about really the process of getting diagnosed. And that's something that I wrote down some notes, and I do want to help some families, because over and over and over, I hear about families who are, the waiting for the diagnosis is the hardest part. So I just want to share a little bit about parents who are on this call, and a lot of our listeners, they're on this call, and I know this is tugging at their heartstrings, especially that waiting period, and is going through lots of professionals and not having an answer. Sometimes not having an answer is the hardest part. And, for me, I've been doing this for 10 years. So when I first started working in the field of autism, it was the DSM-4. So the autism diagnosis, it's defined by the Diagnosis and Statistical Manual of the APA, the American Psychological Association. So I started working with kids with autism. It was 2008, early in 2008. And so it was the DSM-4, the fourth edition. And there was 5 different types of autism. And they had a different name than they have today. And one of them was PDD-NOS, when it just stood for Pervasive Developmental Disorder Not Otherwise Specified. And as a practitioner, we always joked that PDD, it didn't stand for Pervasive Developmental Disorder. It actually stood for Pediatrician Didn't Diagnosis. And we would get all these children, and families were left without an answer. And it's hard because autism is not so you can't detect it in a blood test. And there's a lot of confusion, especially a lot of times you go to a pediatrician, especially if they're older. If their pediatrician is older, they're not as young. They may be sort of practicing before autism was the epidemic it is today. They say, kids, they all learn differently. They all learn at different ages, and teachers are quick to just ask parents to put their child on medication. They're quick to just blame parents. Certainly the history of autism, it is a really dark cloud over the history of autism, and unfortunately many people don't even know what it is, but originally autism was actually blamed on mothers. They said refrigerator moms was the cause of autism. And certainly, thankfully, that's no longer a belief today. But even though, what's known about autism, there's more known about autism, there's a reason that autism is pictured in and it's symbolized by a puzzle piece. It's because there's still so much that we need to learn, and there's so much left to be known. So I just want to share a little bit about, for parents, if you are on this call and you are suspecting your child will receive a diagnosis of autism, what you can do. So when a child, is undergoing an assessment, they're having a meeting to determine their education plan, and that's called an IEP meeting. And IEP stands for an individualized education plan. It is the same nationwide. If you're listening to this call from the U.S., my YouTube channel is actually viewed in 140 countries as of yesterday. So this may not apply to you if you're not in the U.S., but if you're in the U.S., it's called the IDA 2004, the Individual Disabilities Education Act 2004. It specifies that every child who's believed to have a disability, they have the right to an assessment, and they have a right to an individualized education plan, meaning that the school, they cannot reject them because they have autism or they have any sort of learning disability. They can't just state, they're not able to be in the classroom, they're not able to learn. Your teachers must teach your child. They must provide services for your child in a way that they can learn. Now, it sounds to me, and there's multiple assessments that could be done, and I want to bring up one of them because there's one assessment to determine if your child potentially has a diagnosis of autism. It's one that most schools do and a lot of parents actually see before receiving a formal diagnosis. It's actually called the MCHAT, M-C-H-A-T, MCHAT. And I honestly, at the top of my head, I don't know what it stands for. I would have to look it up. But that is an assessment you can actually get online for free. And it's an assessment that determines for parents and caregivers if a child is at risk with autism. It is a rating scale from 1 to 10. It'll ask you questions, and you can determine whether or not your child is at risk for having autism. So if you're a parent and you are on this call and you're wondering, okay, is my child at risk? Google it. Google that assessment. You can do it and complete it for free. If you want to receive a diagnosis of autism formally, there's only really two types of doctors that can receive that can actually give that diagnosis. A pediatrician and a teacher, a psychologist, a psychiatrist cannot diagnose a child with autism. A behavior therapist, you could work in the field like I do. I have 2 master's degrees and 10 years of experience, and I cannot give a diagnosis of autism. The only people who can actually provide a diagnosis of autism that's recognized by insurance companies and by school districts is a developmental pediatrician or a pediatric neurologist. And typically, most even pediatric neurologists won't. I can see the Empire State Building and World Trade Center from the window in my office. I live in one of the largest cities in the United States, one of the largest cities in the world. And even where I live, there's usually a 9 to 12 month waiting list to get an appointment with this one person who can diagnose your child and the one person who has the power to start your child's services. And, John, you talked about your child being diagnosed when they were 5 years old. And every time I hear that, it makes me so sad because I know that, the more intervention a child has at a really young age, the better chance they have of fully recovering and then catching up to their peers, or really just being able to maximize the benefit from therapy. The earlier they start, the better. And it's just such a huge issue in the world of autism. And it's the number one reason why I started my company. I started putting out free parent training videos. I started this podcast is because I know that parents often, they have to wait. It's 9 months, it's 12 months, it's even longer. And then once you get that diagnosis, there's another wait for services because there's just not enough providers and there's not enough people, and there's a lot of turnover because it's not easy. I mean, it's very rare to find someone like myself because we're 10 years in the field. People just don't do it because the bottom line is you're not getting paid enough and people don't think it's worth it, so they do something else. So it's an issue. It's certainly an issue, and it's one that doesn't necessarily seem like that globally we're going to have a solution for, because the number of kids on the autism spectrum, it's rising year after year after year after year. I believe the current number is 1 in 68, which is just horrifying and scary. And there's just, even in New Jersey where I live, we've gone from an early intervention, a direct service model to a parent training model. And, that's for me the mission of my company, is to empower parents to take a responsibility for their child and understand that we don't live in a world where you can rely on anybody else to take care of your child. We don't live in a world where you can rely on your services, your child getting services in school. We don't rely in a world where you can rely on your pediatrician picking up on the fact that your child has autism in the 2 minutes or 90 seconds they spend giving your child a checkup for their 2-year-old visit. It is up to you as a parent to be your child's advocate, and ultimately it's up to you to push for the assessments to get that diagnosis. It's up to you, once you get the diagnosis, to push for services to find out what your child's rights are. And it's ultimately up to you to, once you even get those services, to carry them out. Because the bottom line is that, 40 hours a week is the stats for how long a child really requires intervention every week to fully benefit from it. And no child is getting it anymore. They did 10 years ago when I started, and they don't, because even if an insurance company or a school district was willing to pay for it, it's impossible to find a provider. The number one reason why kids can't get services, it's actually not because there's no funding source, but there's no one actually able to do the services. And that's why I think it's so important, John, that you're helping parents to understand what does it mean to be the best parent you can for your child, and why ultimately I decided to switch from providing direct services to children, and I still do that. I do it still every day, but ultimately I'm moving away from providing direct services, and I'm moving towards a model where I tell parents, okay, look, it's up to you. Like, you can't rely on anyone else. It's up to you. And I'm moving towards teaching parents to reach more people and help more kids and more families, and really just help parents understand, like, this is your journey. And, for you, and I know you wrote this book on the brutal honesty of what it's like to raise a child. What does it mean to play all out, to go all in for your child? And what are some things that parents need to be doing from your experience to just be that parent for your child that is a stand all the time, and the parent that ultimately is going to make the difference? Because the bottom line, it's not your providers. The providers are not going to make the difference in your child's life. It's you as a parent. You're going to make the difference in your child's life. So, John, I can't speak to that because I'm not a parent. I have a dog. I have bunny rabbits, and I love them, but I don't have a child with autism, and I can only take parents so far. So when I have a parent like you who's willing to get on the call and take them the rest of the way, I am so grateful, because my heart is going out, and I just want to give and serve, and there's so much more you could communicate than I can. So, what does it mean? How do parents do it in their everyday life? Balance, going to work and raising multiple, you have more than one child. Your child with autism is not the only one you're trying to help. So you have multiple children. What does it mean to be a breadwinner and to be a student? Because you're a student yourself, right? You're getting a PhD, and you're a husband and involved in your community, and you're a father to more than one children, and one has autism. How does it all work? How do you do it?
sleep is just something we just don't get. Sleep is just a relic of the past that my wife and I just aren't afforded a lot of these days. But I want to touch on something you said just a minute ago, and that's parents' responsibility. And it goes beyond just making sure you're taking your child to the right provider. I will tell you, one of the issues we've had, and I've heard this from a lot of different people, is, caregivers not listening to parents. That is a big problem, in my opinion. Parents, as Jessica said, it's incumbent upon us. If you don't think your doctor or whatever caregiver you're going to is being thorough enough, find somebody else. It is, and if you don't think they're listening to you, because here's the real issue I have, or that we had during this whole process is, and an area that quite frankly we failed in is going, oh, they're a doctor, they must know better than me. Well, the fact of the matter is, nobody knows your child better than you do. It's simply not possible. It's not possible for somebody, doctor, nurse, whoever, whatever their credentials, whatever their credentials are, for them to know more about your child than you do. If you suspect autism, Asperger's, whatever the case may be, push some more. Don't stop until you're satisfied. If you've gone through all the hoops that you think you can jump through, you've talked to everybody you can, and they say, no, your child does not have autism, and you're satisfied with that, then great. You're that much closer to finding out the truth that you need to hear. But the fact of the matter is, you know your child better than anybody, and don't let anybody try to tell you that. I don't know how many other parents, even outside the autism conversation, breastfeeding is another area. I had a friend of mine that was having trouble breastfeeding, and basically the lactation consultants that she was going to it was making it out to be her fault. And finally I just said, listen, this is your baby. This is your choice. If breastfeeding is not working for you, then don't do it. This is your choice. You know your child better. And she's raised a beautiful little boy, and everything was great as soon as she quit trying to force the breastfeeding thing. It's the same thing with autism. You are the parent. You're the one that knows more about your child than anybody else on this earth, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I want to go back to what you said just a second ago, Jessica, about the autism scales. One of the things I've learned in this process is we kind of have a little bit of a misunderstanding, and I'm talking about us lay people here, not experts as yourself, about what autism, the autism spectrum, quote unquote. I learned very quickly. I had somebody explain to me autism is kind of almost like two spectrums. There's, the 0 to 10, yes to no, you don't have it, and then there's the low functioning to high functioning. Because kind of what people think about, and I've heard people say this before, is that you take your child in and they get rated from no, they absolutely don't have it, and they're typically developing and they're perfectly normal too. And then on the other end of the spectrum is Rain Man. The folly in the error in that argument is that means that all of us have a little bit of it. It's just a matter of how much it affects our life, and we know that's not true. Diabetes, you either have it or you don't. It can be not severe to severe. Autism is a little more gray area than that, but still very, very much the same thing. You either have it or you don't. Like I said, there's a little bit of gray area in the middle in there with autism, but you either have it or you don't. And then there's the, how much does it affect your life? Are you low functioning? Is the child low functioning to high functioning? So once I kind of got that explained to me, I kind of realized that we were dealing with something a little bit that, quite frankly, was beyond my expertise. I didn't know anything about it, and I needed to reach out to other sources, people that knew more than I did. But I never, if there's one thing I did right, and believe me, I document this throughout my book, I made many, many mistakes. I made some really egregious errors that, quite frankly, scarred me deeply. But if I did one thing right, it was I never let the medical side get between my role as a parent and my child. I never said, it's got to be the doctor. The doctor's got to be right. I don't know anything about this, or so-and-so's got to be right. I don't know anything about this. I know my son, and I knew something was going on. I knew something wasn't right, and something that could be helped. And the fact of the matter is, until you have an identification for something, for any kind of condition, until you have it identified, you can't do anything about it. I actually had a coworker of mine, a very dear friend of mine, she was telling me one day about how she had just been diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, and she said, yeah, I kind of took my caregivers by storm. And I said, well, okay, how'd you do that? And she said, well, I kept telling my primary care doctor, I've got cancer. I know I've got cancer. Please send me to an oncologist. He kept telling me, no, you don't have cancer. It's this or that. He'd run all these tests. And finally, she told him, either send me to an oncologist, or I'm gonna call one, and I'm gonna pay for it out of pocket, which obviously would be incredibly expensive. And he said, okay, fine. So he sends her to an oncologist. She goes to her oncologist. He does run some tests. He says, yes, you're right. You have stage 4 colon cancer. And she said, I'll never forget the look on his face when the first thing out of my mouth was, oh, thank God. And he looked and he said, well, I've never had anybody respond that way. And she said, if I had sat around and waited on my other doctor, it would have killed me. She said, now we have an identification for it. Now we know what it is. Now we can do something about it. And autism is very much the same way. Until you have that diagnosis, until you push, and push more on the people that can get you there, it's kind of a limbo waiting period until then. And I'm sad to say that I've met more than one person that had been in that autism, that purgatory between I know that it's there and needing a diagnosis. But you just have to push, and quite frankly, you may have to make some people mad. I know we did. I had to more than once had to tell. We pulled him out of a couple of different speech therapy locations because they were treating him for what's called apraxia, and it wasn't the right. It not only wasn't going to help him, it was actually hindering his development. So we pulled him out of one. And we just kept fighting, but like I said, it took 2 years, and it was a very long 2 years. And like I said, we knew something was up. I don't know that we knew that it was autism at that point, but we knew that what we were being told just didn't feel right. And so we kept pushing and pushing some more. And once we finally got that diagnosis, the floodgates opened. So many resources became available to us. We were able to get into ABA therapy, applied behavioral analysis therapy, and I will tell your listeners, if you get that opportunity and you have the means to do that, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It has been a godsend for Rudy. He has come so far in a very, very short amount of time on ABA therapy, and it's been a very good thing. I will tell you another thing we did, decision we made after that I'm not sure that we would have made if Rudy hadn't been autistic. We got a nanny as opposed to putting him in a daycare. I will tell you, we had some experiences with daycares early on. We ended up in a very good one, but once our second child, Angelica, came along, we decided to get a nanny. And our nanny had some experience in these areas, and I will tell you, she made life a lot easier because while we weren't at home, he still had he had a third parent there, and it helped with discipline. It helped with his speech. She can, because we could communicate with her and tell her exactly what we wanted her to work on. That was probably one of the bigger helps to Rudy in his development. But I will tell you, it's also, and this takes some time to get used to the fact that this is a lifelong condition. This is something he will always have. This isn't another friend of mine that kind of suspects that her little boy he's kind of showing some autism tendencies, and we've talked about him a little bit. One of the things I will tell parents, and especially you dads out there, is this is not something you're going to regret. This is not cancer. This is not something that if you could talk to God and say, take this cancer out of him and everything will be okay. This is not that way. Autism becomes a part of you. Like I said, it's not, hey, take the tumor out of him and everything's good. You do not want to take the autism out of him because then that changes him. That changes your child. You don't want that. You want your child just as you have them. This becomes almost a personality trait to you. So my best advice is push some more. You're the parent. It's your call. The worst case is you pick up and you go somewhere else. And just have faith in yourself. It's hard to do, but having faith in yourself is the biggest piece.
Jen, I always usually ask people at the end to summarize the podcast and just the perfect words, but I think you just did. I think you just summarized it. Is just have faith, never give up, know that this is who your child is, that this is a lifelong journey, and that it's going to be okay. And if fight, always fight, never listen. It's funny because literally just 5 minutes before the call, as I was literally like trying to get on the call, and I had some tech issues, so we had to scramble to get on this call tonight. But I was actually literally posting a video called, can you take what autism professionals say at face value on my YouTube channel? And, you could not have summarized it perfectly. As a parent, you're your child's biggest advocate. Find more and more people who will listen to you. And that's it. That's what it's all about. So you just did such an amazing job. On the note of ABA, now I am biased because my background is in ABA. I do believe in a holistic approach to education. People ask me, am I a board-certified behavior analyst? I'm not, because I don't limit myself to one modality, although I actually taught classes to BCBAs, and I have, I have the educational expertise, or I could be a BCBA. But the bottom line is ABA, it's the only scientifically proven method that works for helping children with autism learn. It's the only one that's actually backed by scientific research that children can really progress with it and gain a lot of skills. The degree in which every child can improve is different, but there are children who've even fully recovered. And yes, it was always lifelong, it was always a trait, but have fully recovered in the sense that they are able to go on to go to school, to get married, to work, to have kids, and do all the things that every parent wants for their child. So never give up on that for your child. John, if someone wanted to get your book and wanted to just be in touch with you, and we're going to post it, this is going to be on SoundCloud. This is also going to be on Podomatic. It's going to be on YouTube. And I just wanted this real quick, since I just said YouTube, I forgot to mention this. I apologize. On my YouTube channel, the reason I started this channel is because, you talk about ABA. John talked about it. I just talked about it being the only scientific method for treating kids with autism. I actually decided to take it upon myself. So I found out that ABA, it's really only available in major countries, and truthfully, even in only major cities. If you live somewhere where, you live far away from a major city, you might not get help, even in the United States. And there's many, many countries in the world. In fact, there's more people in the world diagnosed with autism, more parents in the world that have children with autism that do not have access to ABA than do. I decided to provide free parent training on ABA. So you go to my YouTube channel where this is going to be posted, the recording, parenttrainingvideos.com, and subscribe to it, because I put out a free parent training video at least once a week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week, and it's all free training on how to do ABA, because I have decided, like John and I talked about with you, someone has to go first. Someone also has to be a stand in the industry of autism. A professional has to be a stand and say, on my watch, it's not acceptable that there's more parents in the world who don't have access to treatment than do. And I have made it the mission of my country to bring services to all families, regardless of where people live, regardless of their religion, their demographics, their ethnicity, education, regardless of their money, to make that training available. So please head over to that channel, and you can access all that information for free. There's tons of videos on what ABA is and even how to do it as a parent if you can't get services. And John,
Jessica, can I jump in for just 1 second and encourage? I cannot encourage people enough to do ABA. I will tell you, the fact that you're doing it have put this out there for free is a miracle, because I will tell you, folks, it is incredibly expensive to have full-time ABA therapy. We are blessed beyond recognition that our insurance covers it. We pay about $25 a day, but it is tens of thousands of dollars to get full-time ABA therapy, and the fact that you're doing it for free and providing because there's 2 pieces. There's obviously the therapy for the child, and then there's also parent training that you go to as well. The fact that you're doing it for free and putting it out there for parents to have is really a miraculous thing. So everybody, please take advantage of it. I'm telling you, this is very expensive stuff that Jessica's put out there, and Jessica, I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, and it's not only tens of thousands of dollars a year, but it's tens of thousands of dollars a month. It's that's the true reality of why most people don't have access to services. The average rate for ABA is $150 an hour. That's the average industry rate, and studies show your child needs 40 hours a week to really truly benefit. So if you do that math, that's $6,000 a week. So, you do that math, it's $24,000 a month. And that's why kids don't have as many services as they need. That's why people are switching to parent training model. And that's why I decided to be the disruption in the industry. Because like I said, John, someone has to go first. You decided to be that first voice for parents and for fathers, and I decided to be that first voice of professionals and just say, someone just has to share with parents how to do this, because the bottom line is the economy and the professionals and the insurance companies and the school education companies, it's not sustainable to provide services at 40 hours a week for every child, and it's what children need, so it's up to parents to do it. So if someone wanted to get your book, John, and they wanted to reach out to you, how could they do that to make sure that they can get this book? And I can't wait to read it. I know you sent it to me, and I'm so grateful. I'm really excited to read it. And a lot of times people send me things, and I'm not so excited to read it. But I am really, really excited to read your book. So how could parents get it if they wanted to get it? And it will be in the link to the comments on our video as well, and I'll share it on my Facebook page. But where can parents buy it?
Yeah, it's currently available on Amazon Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com in paperback. I have seen actually a couple of different Barnes and Noble stores, mostly here in the DFW area where I'm at, that actually stock it. I'm sure that's not the case nationwide, but you can definitely get it on the website. It's Totally Lost: A Brutally Honest Assessment of Raising a Child on the Autism Spectrum. You can also get it in ebook on both Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. They both have it in ebook now, so both of those places you can get it. I tell you, folks, this has become my life's work. I'm very, very proud of it. I've gotten some really excellent feedback on it. I'm very, very proud of this book, and I think you'll like it. I think you'll find things in there that the feedback I've gotten. This is not from me. This is from other people it'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry. And it will inform you, and that was exactly my intent in writing it, and then of course in publishing it was. This is make no mistake, this is a very emotional journey. These kids will make you laugh and cry in the same sentence. My son does some things that are just absolutely hilarious, and then he does some things that just break my heart. And I just really hope you all like it. Jessica, I'll also provide you the ISBN numbers to post for them. But if you'll search by the title, it'll come up there. And I just really hope everybody can enjoy the book as I enjoyed writing it. I will tell you there were parts of the book that weren't a lot of fun to write. Some of it was very emotional for me. I talk a lot about my personal failures in there, and I had to do that as a coping mechanism. And one of the chapters in the book is just titled "Find Yours," and it talks about coping mechanisms. A lot of different coping mechanisms that people have. Mine was the book. That's literally what my coping mechanism was sit down, write about it, and tell people my story. Other people like to, you may go to counseling, you may cry, you may do, and that's all well and good, but the main thing is make sure you're channeling whatever coping mechanism you have, make sure you're channeling that to helping your child or those around you, and that's kind of what the book was for me. It's a little over 120 pages of coping mechanism.
Well, I absolutely can't wait to read it, and wherever you're listening to this video, it will be in the comments of this section, the description of it. And, I just over this podcast, I do want to just also share, I love to give gifts to everyone, especially if you've listened to this to the end. I'm so grateful. For me, it's my passion. I actually consulted with families today from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm totally sold out of my services. I'm only, for my one-on-one consultations, I'm only taking, the waiting list actually now is actually towards the end of 2019, believe it or not, for my one-on-one consultation services. And as a professional, I'm just so passionate about helping families. That's why it's 10 o'clock at night where I am, and I'm still on this call, just trying to give you this information. I love to give you guys a gift, and especially if you stay here to the end, thank you. Thank you for helping me as a parent to reach my mission of just making services available to everyone in the world. I just wrote an ebook. I know this is the time of year this is being recorded. It's late August, and school's about to start soon. One of the scariest things for parents is whether you're sending your child to school for the first time or to a new school or new classroom and a new teacher is sending your kid to a school when they can't really communicate, they can't really tell you what's going on, and how really terrifying it is, and just what to do. And parents, I know, and John, I'm sure you would agree with this, that parents are kept up all night worrying, is my child going to be okay? Are they going to mistreat him? Am I going to know what's happening? How do I make sure they're safe? How do I make sure that they're actually learning? How do I make sure they're not just letting him, spin tire wheels all day on the toy car? And how to make sure that they're really getting a lot out of school. I wrote an ebook on how to actually maximize your child's education program, how to ease that transition for your family, and just make sure that you can go to sleep at night knowing your child's going to be really set up for success. It is free. You can download it at schoolwithautism.com. Again, just put in your email. I'll send it to you, and then I'll also just send you my weekly newsletter, which also has lots of free parent training tips. It's just my mission to give back to you as a parent and just make sure that you are doing, you know how to do everything possible to help your child be successful. And everything that I've learned, 2 master's degrees, 10 years of professional experience, almost that much in terms of education experience, that, you can benefit from everything that I've learned and done. So thank you so much, John, for coming on this call. Thank you to our listeners who have just, been with us tonight, allowed us to be part of your journey. We are so grateful for you. We love you. Thank you. God bless you. And thanks again, John.
This has been another great episode of Unlock the Code. Unlock the Code is a division of Hope Education Services, one of the world's leading companies where parents can learn about autism online. For even more great content, head over to hopeeducationservices.com today and join our list so we can send you our VIP content and you never miss anything that can help your child succeed. Love our podcast? We would love a 5-star rating on iTunes and Podomatic. Thank you for allowing us to help you unlock the code of autism. You are not on this journey alone. Together, we're going to make a great team.